All right, so want to make sure that you have some space to start centering so that the thighs are even in this butterfly pose. So when you center one other prop I don't think I even said much about was having your sandbag. Okay, so when you are sitting with your knees out and feet together, we're going to try today to have the blocks. Now you don't need to stand up and do it, but I'm just kind of showing your blocks are behind the knees and they're horizontally out versus they could pivot, but we don't want them this way today. We're going to keep them outwards. Okay, so when you're on your seat forward of, you're kind of snuggled up to the short end of the bolster, snugged up, and you're going to place the blocks besides the legs. So, oops, I almost did it wrong there. My habits are coming back in. So it kind of holds my thigh material so there is more support I can absorb. And then I get my belt. I get kind of right into it. The belt goes around my waist. And then as it goes to my feet, try to snug in your heels together so you have a sense of that creating the balance of the ankles. And why not kind of try getting your belt so it's at that base of the shin and it really feels like it's the exact connector spot of the lowest bone in the front of the leg, the tibia. Well, it's that front zone. Just feel how it touches to the foot and use the belt as its connector. Okay? Get the belt very low in the back of the waist. If you get familiar with using sand and you like it across your feet, this is a good time to place it there. If your preference is your sand on your legs and you have two, place it there. If it's on the ribs, wait for a few moments before we get it on there and lower back. Okay, so the legs are supportive angles for the pelvic floor. So if this is a pretty deep sensation in the legs, of course, change, make it more comfortable for you. This is simply an optimistic idea I have in creating the shape, and it might not be an optimistic path for you. So you've got to kind of take this as an outline and make it your home practice. Set your hands onto the sides of the ribs because you can feel that space moving outwards. And let your eyes lower inwards. Feel the spine gradually tractioning. And as you experience the next breath in, feel the breath base at the belly. Feel it move up into the ribs. And then feel connection of the breath up into the chest. So it's almost a 3-part breath and exhalation. Empty the lungs. So I want you to consider carrying that breath awareness as we come into an arm layering pose, Garudasana. So feeling how the arms move open, elbows out, and cross the right arm over the left, intertwine the arms on your back so your head is still relaxed and you're trying to move your elbows in this intertwined position towards your face. Okay, so there is a depth of circulation in the shoulders now. So feel the belly move with the breath. Alternate as you inhale and you exhale so that you can work on lengthening both sides of the breath. And now as you uncross that right arm from over, switch it immediately to the left arm over the right, hook at the elbows. And instead of giving yourself a big hug and then coming into the arm twist, try to keep it very clear that it's about the arm patterns. Since they're extremities, they kind of are going to work with the sequencing to connect our back muscles to our ribs, to our core. So there'll be a sizable amount of core work in the beginning here, all on the back, and then we'll come back to that towards the end phase. So condition your lungs here by taking a sizable in-breath, and then let your arms unwind. Add your sand across the upper rib zone just below the sternum. So it's kind of a mid-rib zone. And as you move either with sand on your ribs or without, either is fine, you're going to space your arms out so the arms are relaxed on the floor with a carriage of the ribs moving with the breath. And so it's called a rib carriage, right? And how we carry ourselves is a common topic with posture. So the nice thing about restorative is we're carrying the body shape into poses that are therapeutic in nature, right? We only consider shapes that have some therapeutic context for our benefit, for the circulation, for the immune system, for the structural support. So we'll let this be an opening shape. Feel the back of your hands rest, feel the fingers maybe curl in slightly. And with each lift of inhale, feel that coordination from the belly to the ribs to the chest. With that sandbag, you're doing weight training, right? For the diaphragm, for the lungs, and likely with that energy driven there to quiet the mind. So be rather curious here where the arms can relax a little bit more. So if pushing them out distant from your shape is tiring in your shoulders, or you feel a lot of warmth in the shoulders, let the elbows soften so that you can truly feel the back of the arms from the elbows out to the hands, respectfully resting. But it's pretty interesting how it creates this openness for the lungs. I know it's the most basic thing. We all can recognize this basic thing I'm mentioning, but to kind of come into your practice, starting with that acknowledgement, opening through the chest, the heart, the front body. And front body opening isn't just about the belly up to the collarbones, it's also the quads. So let's take it there. Slide the hands in so that you can get a hold of your belt. Unbuckle or loosen up the buckle spaces so you can unthread that belt, take it away off of your legs. And if you can do anything that's kind of simple as you slide your feet apart, the knees point up, we're going to move our sand down to the belly and then move our blanket off the top of the bolster. So that's a little bit of a movement back. And then start to reach to a block. And you're going to lift up your hips and slide your block flat under the back of the pelvis for this little bit of core work. Okay, so when I lift my hips up, that's some core connection. And we'll do so many different threads of that. It will be slightly unusual, some of the pockets of work we'll do with the core. But as you reach down into your legs straight now, feel where that sand could be perched on the top of the thighs. I have mine really at the front of the pelvis. That feels comfortable for me. If I step the feet apart, that might feel a little bit safer in my knees. And then really give a feel of your thigh lids. They are slightly contracted just to be in the shape, but we're not interested in folding our knees under and trying to do some some pose patterns that are a little difficult on the knee joint. So we'll keep it simple. Get a belt, wrestle it from underneath you. And then as you move your belt overhead, I'm going to double up my belt so it feels a little thicker for my hands to grasp onto. And then as I move it back overhead, take a reach with your chest and play with this a little bit. Instead of exact, got the pose, check the box type of mentality, you might move your arms a little over chest and back overhead. Then I get some motion, loosen up the joint. And since the movement back has a little more intensity throughout the body, take the hands out as wide and be generous with the width of the clutch of your belt. And if bending your knees seems like it's a better option right now for your knees or your back, just go back to lifting up the knees and placing the feet easily to support you. Okay, so feeling how the chest is a little bit vulnerable right now, opening, receiving. We'll take this into a Viparita Karani pose, okay? So we'll need our belt for this one today. So you'll want to bring your belt to your ribs, and then as you take the sand off the front of the legs, scoot your feet in, so you're bending through, and then you'll lift up a knee, draw the knee towards your chest, and you lift up the other. It's essential you do not have an extra blanket on top of your bolster here because of the pressure in your upper back. It's quite a bit to work with. And then as you unravel your belt, unbuckle it so you got the full belt to support you, lift up both feet and have a belt underneath them so that you can even get here. Sometimes just getting your feet up with this much core challenge underneath you, it's already setting you up for a little bit of discipline in the mid-body. So you might set your feet a little bit apart on the belt. You might kind of play with that distancing experience with the legs. I mean, you're kind of working with it. You're working with distancing, and you might feel some awareness with that in your body too. Feet are more distant than from the brain at this moment. But the reality is the feet being upside down, right? Your perspective is what's helpful for your brain. So having your head below and your feet up. So if you're getting pretty, kind of feisty with the belt, tugging on it, thinking that will do more good, see if you can find a pretty relaxed balance. Maybe some of us that have a lot of mobility and flexibility feel reaching up to the feet a little closer to them is a little bit more relaxing because you're not bending your elbows as deeply. Some of us want to bring the belt down to our hands, all the way down to the waist and rest your hands kind of on your ribs. That's a good option. So the key here is to keep the feet up, straight up versus resting against a wall or having sand. And try to get your feet to push up a little bit more. Don't have to get off of the block, but feel the feet trying to activate. Get the belt closest to your heels. As close as it will go without slipping off. And then take the left foot out, bring the left foot down and straighten. Option. I'm going to start with bending. Just keep it simple for my mid-body. And it will change, right? If the leg straightens out, the left thigh, you might notice this is kind of welcome for your hamstring. But I'd like you to feel how your foot pushes forward into the belt. So there is this deep resistance in the stomach muscles. And if there's a deeper arch in your right side of your back, feel that left foot turn in and or bend the left knee so that you can balance the low back. This is where you want your foam block to be even, well, still firm, but a little bit cozier. If you have a cork block, this could be intense. Or a cement brick. Okay, now feel how the hands are holding to slide the belt closer to the ball of the foot and let that calf enjoy that sensation. I know it doesn't get woken up very often completely. It gets squished down, so feel the alternating reality of your calf. Now stay with that energy of pulling on the right foot. Slide the left foot in and then join the right foot. Left foot comes up to join. And when it's joining, do you feel, if you get your belt to the ball of the foot, both calves? If it feels richest when you have one up, noticing what's going on with the back of your legs, it all affects it, you know, everything has an effect, everything. So when the right foot comes down now out of your belt, you're going to lower down either through the whole leg or keep it bending. You choose. And I'm going to stay with my belt at the ball of the foot because I can sense that my calf could use that stretch. Doesn't have many opportunities to get flushed out upside down. So pull and try to relax your shoulders, your neck. Center the mind. You probably have enough support under your head, but if you don't, you can add that blanket back. Now, feeling one final moment here, right leg is straight or bending. If it's straight, you can feel that right side of the abdomen strengthen just to coordinate the effort of the legs. And if you're not having fun yet, here we head in. Slide the right foot back, take the belt off, and then bring both legs up. Circle the feet, separate so you don't trip over one. And then as I remove my belt momentarily, I'm going to reach around to find out where that ball is. If you don't have a ball, don't spend any energy worrying about that issue. We're going to use it for our hip work. So unwind through this one. I feel if holding the back of your legs temporarily is of interest to your spine stretching. And if it feels like you can actually stretch your back without holding your legs, go there. Okay. Visualize as if your feet could get a little higher, like kind of visualize that possibility. You're still in body, so unlikely they're going to float up, but have that awareness that the back has potential to be lengthening. And then shoulders are pressing back into your bolster. That's really important here. Open the chest, and then as you bend your knees, and lower down both of the feet, toes, probably the ball of the foot comes down, not the heels to start. And then lift up your hips, slide the block over to the side, lower down the spine and let the back of the pelvis kind of mush into the bolster. So if you kind of slid down, maybe you scoot back. And then cross the right foot up to the left knee and take a ball or a towel or a block or nothing besides the upper outer left thigh and lean your body weight into that ball. Hold the right knee and feel the knee resist, or the muscle in that right leg resist a bit. And as you're feeling that crossover position, feel the waist. Okay, and notice if you can let your eyes rest here. The breath center. Now this is different than having the leg straight crossed over, right? We have the bending feeling of our hip, our knee, down into the foot. So feel the bending places and feel how that creates that current circulation in your right hip. So I'm trying to define my hip versus swinging my arm back right now, but you could reach your right arm back. It's pretty individual where you're kind of splicing it right now, where you want to focus your energies. Now with the belly operating with the breath, or if it hasn't been, bring it back to that lower belly space. And as you unwind from that crossover to the left, you're going to switch sides, but as you do, uncrossing, left foot up, feel how you kick the foot, how you open the hip and place the left ankle to the right knee. And then as you put the ball to the right upper outer thigh, and it doesn't have to be, even if you have a ball that's pretty mushy, it's okay. It's nice to have something that has a responsive surface, right, for the connective tissue. So if anything's in your way, a block, you might push that aside. But feel this cross fiber action in the lower belly. And then as you hold the left knee with that right hand, you want to grasp a hold and then reach the left arm back. If you prefer arm to the floor, relax the left arm down. Yeah, and you get a sizable breath experience when your arm is back, but you might find a mental kind of measurement of contentment when the arm is down. So you kind of weigh your options, and the buildup of contentment is important for survival, or just to create some calm. That left hip is also feeling some relationship to the left side of the waist, maybe not big time yet, but we'll get there. So give it a few more moments. Notice what is going to help you. Is it going to be pulling the leg? Is it going to be, keep it simple, let it just kind of hang in limbo here a little bit. Limbo. Limbs and bows. Limbs with bows. That'll be our holiday edition class. Okay, now as I start to shift, I'm going to keep this left knee in the same perspective. It's not going to change much, but what's good is that we'll put weight into this, the bones on this leg. So as you bring the knee back center, try to go pretty quickly into the turn to the left, uncross, and then come into a prep for side sage, okay? So you're going to take your bolster across your mat horizontally, and the reality today with the propping is going to be a little bit curious, but I'm going to go with it because I want to stay with the kind of shape program, the pose program. So, you might have to be a little patient with the prop work here. So give me some time to figure out all these motions, how it will work. But once you get into the side kind of flesh reaching, we have this right side body lengthening. I surely want to use my sand, okay? And sand placement, you might wad up your blankets here so you can kind of be curious with it and not grip your neck so much. But not to say anyone's doing that, but it sometimes happens. Now, if my sand is low on my thigh, I feel a little bit of a grade kind of pressure in my knee. So I tend to find that this is a little better for me if my sand is higher, if I can get it higher up and focus on my ribs. Now, that said, it's challenging to get your sand on sometimes to your pit. But with the work ahead, we're going to reach our right arm over. If you're missing a block, see if you can get one without losing too many props or too much sand. And then as you reach your right arm, overhead to your left side, find that placement of the block if you're using that, okay? And then line up your waist. But something I'm finding to learn about, and it's hard because we're not doing right now the in room and noticing how people respond. But, get a feel for if your hips are really pushing back, like your tail is back, you're arching, try to get it so it's moderate, it's kind of neutral, a little bit more neutral. And it will be easier on the knee, right? If you're not trying to kind of punch back into an arch and then the knee has to go back. So feel where it's almost like you're just trying to lengthen the side and it's pure and simple. And that right arm is active, whether it likes it or not. If it's too much going to the not side, place the arm in a safe space, right? Maybe down by the left arm or on your side. Yeah, it's always surprising to actually notice how many poses we're using an extremity to touch, right? When we do twists, we do a lot of touching an arm to our hip. There's self-touch with the work sometimes. So notice when those moments start to feel comforting for you. And they're pretty subtle. So take a few moments. If your side bones experience the breath wave, however kind of weird that sounds, there is kind of a wave internally of movement flushing through the ribs, at the base of the heart, through the diaphragm. And now fine-tuning this, whether you stay in that still point and don't change anything except your deepening of the study of this shape. So you're a connoisseur of breath. You're in a good environment to enjoy that. Okay, now feel the movement of that right limb so it connects down to your left side, right to that left arm. Okay, so this right side is going to be kind of it's going to be what we're going to stay stretching, although it will be quite interesting how we slide into this. We're going to be coming up on the bolster, but kind of stay with the energy. We've been linking the right side. For better or worse, we'll find some good things to do this right side lengthening. So connect the dots. The quiz will be at the end. No quiz. So let that sand slide off and feel how the ribs get a little pulled. They are amazing how they get back to their stability though, right? It's like, they're healthy. They get back to stability, well hydrated. Now when I turn into my bolster, roll in a little bit, come up to sit on it. Now, how about we get a little focus on your blankies behind you. You're gonna have that stack and you might as well just leave that. You'll want it for your twisting. So you'll come up to sitting side reach to sitting, right foot forward of left shin. And then as you set up your props, if your knees could use some lift, even if you're pretty bendy, when you're like this, if your knees are not like on the ground, they probably need some help, right? The legs need some support. So number one, we got a right leg stand. And then you have blocks, right? You've got maybe a ball. You're going to find something to put under the left knee, maybe something under the right leg. So you feel like you're sort of in a box shape from your hips to your knees. It's kind of a box. We've heard of this called box pose before. Okay, fire logs pose would be when you stack the legs, but we won't put the knees there. So take a moment, maybe kind of wrangle around, moving your shoulders, moving your head, tilting it side to side. Yeah, anything goes to feel your sitting body. Maybe you're a tapper. You like to tap your shoulders, your arms, your ribs, your back. So feel when you lean forwards, with or without any blocks, right? Maybe you want to get one. So you've got something in front of you to have as a destination. And so when I lean down to that front forward bend, remember it's a forward folding pose. Okay, so the arch of the back is defined and it probably gets very centered in your back and it goes right into the middle, right? The piece of energy in the center of the back, maybe a little bit below the space behind the heart. So take your block or your hands simply to the left side of your mat. You be the negotiator here with the prop support or not. Okay, now the lower I move my upper body down, we'll feel it into that hip. But what's important today is that we're going to take this shape. Like I mentioned, we're just kind of working on a real serious sequencing and linking with this right side. Okay, so we're going to take this position so we're centered once more in the front. Hands are blocked. Take a deep breath so that you can fill up through the back rib, spatially to the upper back. Let your head move down. And down means it's just pointing down. Okay, now hands on the legs. Okay, coming on up. Grab a belt. You decide if you want your sand to stay on the same leg or if you feel like the left leg, or if you have two sandbags, will be more grounding. So I have a little bit of an inkling of where we're going with it. So I'm going to choose left leg, but heck, if you feel pretty good with the right leg, just keep it there. So we'll take a belt and we're going to hold it in that left hand. Now, when you bring your arm, right, the direction for this rotator cuff stretch, right, or this opener, is I'm going to lift the left hand up with the belt in my hand, yep. And then when I move back, I basically turn the hand out, right, like you're kind of holding a platter, you turn your hand out. Then you lift your elbow up, yep. So far, so good. So as I hold on to the belt, I'm going to reach my right arm around. I'm going to actually push out with that hand. But the key here, once you get your belt, is that you're alternating, well, the left elbow is going up and the right elbow is moving back, right? So you want to get a feel of these opposing directions with the arms. And there is a reason that we're connecting with this shape. So I find this to be quite a disciplined pose. I'm still scrambling for evidence that it's a necessary pose in a yoga diet for shoulders, but it seems to keep coming up. So to the contrary, right, good for rotator cuff, but if it's feeling a lot of muscular intensity, you can make it a little more mild, right? You don't have to tug as deep with the right hand. But let's see how we can link this with some good science for the shoulder. So when I'm using the connection, of course, the ideal is you have your hands together in this shape. I like the belt, even if I can scramble them up. I like the belt because I can get a fuller lift with my left tricep, okay? So as you let go, some people, the arms are just long and they hold together like that. You're gonna have your left knee towards the ground, so you're gonna slide off any block that's under that left knee, unless you're not gonna take the twist with the foot over. So here's the two versions. Version without foot crossed is right foot is on block, ball or block is under left knee, and then we're turning to the right. Okay, so this arm is still fresh. Now, you have a fresh arm. Those that are going to cross the foot over, right foot over to the outer side of that left leg are going to bring the left arm to that right leg and really get a try here of getting your waist, like you're reaching for your belly, you're turning it to the right. There's nothing wrong with implementing this forward motion. And then as the left elbow wrangles around to the right leg, you're completing that rotational possibilities. It's always further you could possibly go, but feel where there's spaciousness in the back and there's a very serious opportunity to massage into the kidneys, into the vital organs, abdominal organs, and then feeling how can your neck be in a state where the arms are pinned and they're not slouching, right? So your neck is in an optimal place to gently stretch side to side, tilting your ear to your shoulder, optimally to the left. And feel the head straight up from the spine. So you've got helium head, okay? Keep with the idea of rotation. Breathe. Okay, now once that left arm has had enough input for all this work we've done with it, come back in center and get the arm to lift up. Hold on to that right elbow with the left elbow, sorry, with the right hand. So I'm going to lift my right hand up to the elbow tip and press back. Okay, let go of the elbow, lower down the arms. Take a moment just to feel the back muscles in that work. And then we'll take a counter twist to the left. So right arm inside the right leg, left hand back to your blankets, twist to your left. So getting some spaciousness through the chest, through the shoulders. Very good, good. So that shoulder pattern of strengthening and you can feel a connection into that right SI joint on this pose. So when you turn back center to the front, take this hand off, pull the blankets in closer to your bolster, and you can have one or two for this pigeon pose, but you decide. So when you slide back your right leg, you reach it and you wrap it back around you. I know it could get pretty technical, but we'll keep it simple. So the left knee is forward. It's kind of kitty corner. Now, the nice thing about this knee pattern is that we're forward folding, right? So I have my blocks under my elbows, and my hip is having a little deeper experience than it just did. So as you kind of bear the weight on the left or the right front hip bones, it's a completely different reality for right hip bone in the front and left hip bone. So spend the moments maybe for you to let your right foot relax, and you certainly might work with the vision of elbows strong, forearms strong. So you have an opportunity to measurably support your posterior core here. But I still would like it to be focused on as a forward bend versus a back bending pigeon pose. Yeah, so feel where that left foot is connected, either closer to the bolster, or if you like it to be farther away, you could do that as well. Okay, now, since we've been in this for a good minute and a half, plus, we're going to come back and we're actually going to find a little bit more of a table or a plank pose, which works for your zone in your bones, your bone zone. So when the hands are down, the palms are open. I'm hoping they're open for business. When you lift up, you're going to stretch that left foot back and feel, the resistance. I'm sure you feel that in the total body. It's a total body reaction. And then lower down your knees, kind of humble approach. Round your back into cat, chin to chest. And inhale, arch through the spine. Take this as an opportunity to feature cycles of alternating rounding and symmetrical arching. I know it seems like a kind of a routine rhythm that you do this spinal vertebral mobility practice, but it is quite universally symmetrical in our bodies to do these patterns. So come back to neutral. If you feel interested in getting to a down dog, stretch your knees up and back, feel the back of the knees open and cooling off, and let your head surrender down. So the hands are holding the brunt of the weight in the body, right? So you want to get as much of that full V reach through the hands and back to the feet. So you have a lifting hip support. Okay, now lower down the knees, and you might be on a different zone in your direction to the screen, but what we're going to do, so I can see towards, is we're going to come down to side stage with the right hip now. So we're going to turn so our right hip is down, trying it out, different directions today a little bit. And if you're like to have that stack of blankies, so it seems like I've been getting into having the top blanket rolled up kind of halfway, a little bit more of a double fold. And then when I lower down to this right hip, I've got my ball on the inside of that left leg. I have my block overhead. I've got my sand, and I hope you do too. So where the support is, first is your side body opening, okay? So we want to find where the angle of the ribs on the bolster is plenty. So if my bolster is right next to my hip, if it's in the middle of the waist, and all those things. And then the left arm stretches overhead and touches down. Okay, so feeling where the rib cage doesn't only move gradually with the breath, and keep in mind you want it to be consistent. Yeah, sometimes your practice, the best way to go through it is to follow a routine, and a routine that has some concentration on balance and good sequencing, and just kind of trust that. So now we're onto that left side, and interestingly, we were on the left pigeon, right? So now we're flushing that side of the hip. So whether it makes sense right now, maybe it's something you can make sense of later too. Gives you something later to make sense of. So if the back of the waist feels cozy and comfortable, enjoy that. Feel where the eyes rest into the brain. And brain being the experiencer inside, or as your kind of your director. See if you can let your brain align with the breath and scan the areas of the body the breath affects. Yeah, when in doubt with the weight of the head, let it really be a weight into your blankets. I think learning how to weight your head is a real trick to that, isn't there? Sometimes that's the last thing that lets go when you're resting. So the neck, the shoulders. Yeah, one side for this might feel a lot better for you than the other. So kind of subscribe to a little bit of your self research where you can use support or emphasis and direct the awareness there with the breath, with the reach. Give a few more moments. If your left arm is fatigued, you can lower it down besides your right arm. Once you get pretty good alignment between your weight into your right hip and the sandbag, you might find you can be in the shape for quite a while comfortably. Right? The idea is time in the shape to influence and reap the benefits. Okay, so we have the left side as the focus, right? So when we do begin to move up to sitting, this is still the side that we're working on, the left. But it is quite different when you hinge at the hips and the waist is going to go in a forward perspective, but it still influences this left hip. Okay, so if you're a little bit more content in this pose for a little longer, you can always stay. Okay, there's no forceful teaching here that you've got to follow. But when you let your sand slough off, you might feel that kind of curling in, that coiling, that spiraling in. Okay, and then when you come up, kind of feel how you work with that to come up and then to sit. So you're going to use your hands, of course, to get yourself to sit, and then cross the left foot in front of the right knee. And I don't know about where you feel with that transition, but I don't feel like it imports right away when I sit. It's like, okay, now I'm sitting and I still feel my normal sitting feeling, which isn't necessarily my hip is open. Wow. So some of that may linger. And when you add your props underneath you, all your goodies, get them back so they're kind of all around you, tucked in. Sand on left leg. And as you lean forward, you might take a perspective of hands back, open chest. I like to put my hands on this one to the bolster and then push a little bit down with the heels of my hands and lean, especially if you feel like like you're short-ish, right, in some of your joints, even if you're tall or long. You still might feel in your joints, they're kind of scrunched. It's like a scrunched up pressure. So when I lean forwards, I'm going to take my block. I'm going to try to fold at the hinge of my hips. Now my hands could go to the top right corner. They could stay forwards. I think it should be really personal choice on that one. So, you know, if I venture to the right corner, it feels a little bit better for my hip. Like it's a little more spacious in the muscle belly. So noticing where the spaciousness internally, where that root is for you each pose. Yeah, and if you want to make it kind of a languid, you know, moving pose, of course. However you want it to kind of unroll. And as the head lowers down, big part of it, head and neck and shoulders. I know, even though they're not being like stepped on during the day, like lower body spaces get kind of jammed down, they certainly can feel the most jammed, huh? Upper parts. So try out the arm work that we do coming up and just feel what that offers you. It might just be a different sensation in those spaces for the time being. Okay, now if your block is to the right, you're going to come back center and you're going to start to work your way to upright spine. It's natural curve. And then moving that sand to the right thigh, unless you have two sandbags, you got one on each. Okay, so I'm going to put my foot on the block for this arm pose and just kind of see if that changes my knee circulation. I'm just trying to find poses that are friendly as all to the knee. Probably when they're buoyant, they're going to feel more supported because they're buoyant. Okay. All right, so as I get my belt, I'm going to hold on to it with that right hand. And, you know, there's ways of doing this, though, where you can have your belt buckled up and you can make a little loop, right? And you can use that concentrated loop to get a hold of. I know, mine's twisted up. Okay, I'll do it twisted. Okay, so I'm going to reach back and up with my left hand. It's a little more concentrated, so what can happen is I can hook my hand into it like my wrist and then press my elbow down and back. So it's a different way to do that with your belt in a little loop. I think you would probably practice it more often if you had a looped belt because it just feels kind of cool. I like it. Like I mentioned, this one comes up over and over in therapies, whether it's, you know, yoga practice or other body movement therapeutics. This one for the rotator cuff. So we're working on a degree of movement on that shoulder complex. So if the right elbow is just about done, right, it takes maybe 30 seconds, 45, you feel like, got that one. You know, get that feel of circulation. If it's too much with the belt buckled up in a loop, then unbuckle it. Take your time to untangle. Okay, now, so we feel the tricep of that right arm. You feel the back of that arm. Now, try taking that hand, left hand out of the belt, and I still want you to feel that right elbow up. So let go of the belt. Let the left hand lift up to the right elbow like we did before. We just did it after this other pose, so we're adding it earlier on. Now, feel when that right elbow is back. Okay, and then just let the arm go down. You don't have to carry it right into the twist right away. You'll feel kind of the residue in the arm immediately. It's kind of, you know, pulsing out through the arm. So when I take the block out from my left knee and the ball and all those things I have underneath my leg pieces, I'm going to cross the left leg over to open up my back. Right, so this is opening up the back of the pelvis, this position with the legs. So now the right elbow hooks to that left leg and I rotate. But you know, sometimes it feels too fast in my SI area. It's like, wow, that kind of whipped on through. So you might use generous, you know, kind of soothing gestures of movement, holding the knee, left hand on the belly, gently kind of even brushing the belly towards the left to massage that viscerally, that skin to move left. Pretty good. It's nice to be doing this at home because you probably feel more comfortable doing that. So in that right hand is going to reach over, elbow touch, presses, left hand back, turn. That made a difference for me to go slower. I have to admit, when I slowed it down, now when I adjust this lower, the kidney spatially feels a little bit more spacious, hydrated. Give it a few moments here. Feel the turn of the waist. Breathe. Rotate. Head tilts. Both directions, right? Get a feel for ear toward shoulder, twist. Yeah, and the belly won't feel long until you get into pigeon. So instead of expecting you can get really tall in your spine, you get your belly to muster up some lift and expansiveness. The idea here is to squeeze and soak and get energy moving through your organs. So this time we'll go right into the counter twist. We won't do that arm shebang movement because we already did it. So learning how to sequence as we go, turning to the right. You know, if you feel this in a very specific, you know, spot on each hip, top of the thigh, hip flexor, notice, because that will be a place to scan when we get to our prone relaxing pose today. So notice the turn. Yeah, your eyes might want to go closed and in. I know they usually just close, they don't usually move in, but a little of the two. Okay, and then unwind and come into your pigeon with that right leg as the front runner here. So if I have my blankets, I'm going to use the same I did last time just to be even in my pelvis. If you have one blanket behind your bolster, then you go down to one. And then take that left leg back. Okay. All right, now with the back foot reaching a little bit, it's a little itsy bitsy reach, but the left side of the waist has a stretch. Now when I lower down and I don't make this a back bending pose any longer, I could go down to my elbows on the floor. I don't have to use the blocks perhaps, but you might feel the differences in your back muscles. I think it's kind of fun to explore that back musculature. We all want to have a happy back. So feel that right hip open. Feel the left thigh moving back. Now, once everything's in those directions, then you're not spending a lot of energy trying to stimulate movement, but the energy is in kind of centering in and turning inwards and that inner guidance with the breath. So flowing any of the muscles in their perspective. So the right knee is open. If this doesn't jive with you though, remember you can always get out of the pose. Right? If it's not jiving, shift out. So feeling where that right knee is out affects the, well, it's not out, but affects the hip. So we'll place a moment here where our head lowers down. You really feel the neck release. Okay, now when you let the back leg kind of help you move yourself, this time we are going to move back and start to do a little bit of symmetrical patterns, up dog and so forth. So when you do come back, you might use your blocks under your hands for that migration. And then when I take the right leg back, I'm going to lower down and kind of skim the surface of the bolster and let the tops of the feet try to press, right? So the blocks will make it easier on your back. It'll get you higher up. It definitely gets you higher though in the body, right? It's an optimal support for your body, although it depends on your wrists, how it affects your wrist. Some it's yay and some it's no way. It's yay or no way. So shoulders are motioning center and neutral in the joint. Now, when you come back into dog pose, you might use your blocks and love them for this one. So when you move back, you're going to position your feet. I'm so used to using blocks in down dog, so I feel a little longer in my limbs. But some, again, may choose minus blocks. So if you don't like your blocks, you can push them aside after you come down on your knees, okay? Let your hands press away and the hips move back. Okay, adjust for a few moments here. We're going to walk our hands carefully back to the bolster. Then we're going to come into a standing forward fold. So I want you to let your knees bend fully and your head lower and your arms sweep back. So they're either holding your elbows or your hands are resting on the bolster. So it's one or the other. I would notice for your personal inventory of how your shoulders feel, right? So if your shoulders are already feeling pretty worked out so far, you might go for dangling or holding your elbows so there's traction this direction down towards the floor. You know, if you're a real shoulder workout, upper body, you might be happy to hold your bolster a little bit, right? You might reach forward, have your hands, your head centered and through. You might even take your bolster up and short end and lean down. There's a few options that are kind of nice to try and explore. We'll give ourselves about another 30 seconds here. So you have 30 seconds to explore. Okay. So where the direction is in your arms is pertinent, right, to our core body right now, our fluidity in our midsection. Okay, take a moment to feel your standing body. Let your hands slide back and let the feet be at least hips distance apart. We're going to work with that coiling. So you round your back, coiling, rounding, hands just above the knees, and then just push gently into your legs and come up to stand. You won't see all of me, but you'll lift your arms up to the ceiling and you'll notice difference in the blood pressure, right? The consciousness from the head to the legs is slightly altered. So now as you come back forward, feel the pressure down into all the corners of your feet. It's kind of nice to practice that. Feel the corners of the feet, feel them, and then lower down. And now as we walk on forward into our upper paws here, you're going to scoot down into the knees and then take your blocks aside, turn your bolster forward, and then come into a lunge. So you're going to step your right foot to the top right corner and let the left thigh, kind of press to that bolster. The blankets are going to likely make this a little more intense. So if 2 blankets under your knees is like, whew, that's a lot more on my thigh than I want, then just get rid of one. Because it's going to push up the leg, and with that leg push up, it might feel different in your spine. Blocks under the hands are really welcome on this one, I find. So my right foot is turned out, right? It's not a parallel foot by any means. And my left thigh, as it lengthens down, it's sort of like an ambitious splits, right? It's almost moving into that perspective for the hip joint. So we're trying to keep it tailored for quadricep, front leg opening to the hip flexor. So feeling that connection into the psoas, you might feel your hands on the blocks and feel the back bend, the arch of the spine. Might feel pretty good to have that arch. Imagine you feel the inner thigh. Some sensation there. Okay, now when we come back, I want you to take that up dog between sides. So you might have your blocks flat under your hands and lean down to the bolster lengthwise this time and stretch up and find the pattern of hands press, spine arching. Feel the tail relaxed. So the tailbone isn't pressing in. It's kind of basically floating back from the seats, right? So it's kind of interesting to notice how your circulation is affected in your pelvis. And then come back and step the left foot. And, notice if you have to kind of wag your hips to the right to get your foot to move, your knee to move, or your whole leg. So I try to use what's kind of natural and organic. I'm going to lean my weight right and step my left foot out and then lower down versus being kind of prohibitive of movement. So finding what works for your block height under your hands. Mine's a little higher than the last pose with our forward motion. So feel where that arch is and the difference from one side to the next, if that's a reality for you. So if your blanket set on under your legs is not going to support you enough, here's one other idea you can work with, is to put that up on the bolster. All right, so it's kind of on the edge of my bolster. So my thigh just kind of smacks right to that blanket. It's a little more comfortable for my quad. Yeah, and maybe find things that are going to be supportive and easeful for your quads. So I'll give you kind of a heads up. We are going to move into a little bit of a flow and then into bridge pose. So this whole hip flexor area will be highlighted as a focal point. So I would program your leg position right now so that you really feel this opposite reach of that left foot out, the right leg moving back. So if I can mentally kind of scan the sensation, it really is as far apart as the leg pattern would be in this type of direction in a standing position. When you're seated, you can move the legs farther, or you're on your back, it's different, but standing version is challenging. Okay. Be good to be kind of four-legged here, feeling that experience. Okay, now when you move, caution, be kind to your support. Now when you move, you're going to move that left leg back and flow so that we take the blocks away. We move the bolster forwards. I'm just going to turn it horizontal, move my blankie. And then move my knees apart so they're about as wide as my ribs. So maybe tuck them in a tiny bit. And then when you lean back, I know everyone's knees are different on this child's pose. So if I lean back and it's too much, some of you will be very cozy to sit back to your feet. Some will find no way but you might feel better with a blanket on top of your calves. So you can really tube it up. Calf tube. Okay. And then lower down. If there's any hardship around the knees, then you're going to pass on it and have your hips up and your arms forward and head down. Okay, so if there's anything where you feel pressure building, that's not ideal. So when I lean back and I kind of squish the blanket, that's my favorite version, is having this blanket on top of my calves, head down. Now relax the hands. Guide your body weight so it's lurking on the lower leg bones. Okay, so those lower bones are going to support you now. You're going to lean forward and take that blanket off. And as you guide a leg forward, it doesn't matter what leg, but you're going to come down to your back. So we're going to go right smack to the back. Now, blanket behind you is going to be rarely used for us on this bridge pose. So I'm going to encourage you to have the blanket really flat if you need it under your head. If you're on a really hard surface, you might need that blanket. But otherwise, we're going to lower on our back with our feet on our bolster. I know I keep feeling for my blanket, but I know better than to use it for this. So if you need it, use it. And now you might notice if you were to if you can see yourself in your screen or you're observing that, if your head is tilting back and the crown of your head is towards the floor, then you need a blanket, right? So some of us might find the use of a really flat height, maybe not the blanket in that quarter fold, to something low. And it's purposely there to support your head, not your cervical vertebral. We don't want to create more curve. So buckle up the legs. Huge piece of this is the belt. So I want you to get your belt around. And first, just have that belt somewhat loose. So I'm going to kind of loosen up my belt. It's going to be at the upper part of my thighs. Right, so kind of feel where the thighs feel fairly thicker space, thicker piece of the thighs. And as the bones in that space are likely going to resist this, you could do a couple things. Well, if you have two belts, right, you could use one on the upper and one right above the knee. That's something that's helpful. But for right now, this is the important piece. So I hope you have a belt that's long enough. So we're going to use it for the chest as well. So what you'll take is make sure your bolster is under your feet so you can actually push down into it. If it's too far forward, it's going to basically not be helpful for your strengthening. So I'm going to push down. And now first I have my arms down below. They're not overhead, right? They're down below. Okay. I'm going to take the belt tail and I'm going to slide it so it's underneath it's on the floor under my rear. Simple as that. This way you got to really use your belt. You can hold onto your belt, palms open towards the ceiling, of course. Shoulders are back and down. You're going to lift up your hips. Notice your knees. If you feel pressure around the side of either knee, what you're going to need to work with is likely the belt lower on the leg towards the knee. So I want you to lower down your hips. You can let go of the belt. If you don't need to readjust your leg, then keep a hold of it. So you be the decider. So you go, well, maybe I did feel a little bit around the side of my knee. So maybe you move the belt a little lower. Hold the belt with your hands. Push into your belt with your legs as you lift up the whole time. So as I push and I lift up, I'm pushing out. Do you know what that means? It means your knees go outwards more than they are parallel, right? They're not straight forward. So this is what we're working with in bridge, is not to try to keep the knees in some hallmark version of bridge pose. I don't know where that came from. Okay, so hold onto your belt and then feel the shoulders back and down. Okay, now adding on. Gonna keep my belt there. I'm gonna take a block. I'm gonna place it under the back of my pelvis, and I'm gonna turn my block up to the second height. If you can do that, have the block horizontally underneath the back of your pelvis. It'll feel so nice to rest onto it. And you'll feel as if your glutes just got a break. Okay. They were fire and now they're ice. Maybe not quite ice, but it could be. So now I'm gonna hold my belt again with my hands gripping, shoulders back, and really try to get your shoulders to press back and down. Be cautious with your neck here. We're not interested in tipping our chin up and back. And we also want to have that throat support in the glands of the throat. So you want to feel a little bit of kind of squeezing into the thyroid, the parathyroid. So feel a little bit of that flexion in the neck. Okay, now I'm going to keep a hold of my belt and I'm going to stretch my legs down. So this is a full Setu Bandha Sarvangasana, which is interesting. So when you're prepping for shoulder stand work, right now you hold that belt, right? We could have a belt around the upper elbow, above the elbow, but we're going to stay with this. So I'm pushing into my block with my arms. My shoulders are back and down. And I'm holding with a little bit of vigorous quality with my hands on the belt. All for my shoulders and my chest opening. Now you can feel how the legs are pretty comfortable with this position. Hip flexors open. Give it a few more seconds. There might be something enjoyable about it. I think for me, at this point for the shape, I would do well with having my bolster maybe a little bit forward. So when my feet are on the other side, they don't drop down so fast. So you can adjust so that your feet maybe have more bolster under the lower legs. That would be ideal for most. Now push the legs out so that they're right against that belt resistance. Really do. Push them out. You don't have to turn your feet out, but push out into the belt. Okay, now with that letting go of the belt, bring your arms overhead. Inhale. And as you exhale, lower the arms down by the sides. It's like doing bridge pose without lifting the hips. Okay. Now slide the legs in. They have to kind of do that as one piece, almost a little bit of a one-shot deal. And then when you lift up your hips, find just the smallest lift off your block. This is core, right? So I'm going to slide the block out. We're going to do just a few more directions actually in the session that are fairly deep. So when I lift up my hips here, I want you to bring your arms overhead. And if you reach back with your arms, just enough, doesn't have to be anything extremely intense, but they're overhead. Now you're going to lower your spine down with the arms overhead on the floor so they're resting. And then spine vertebrae by vertebrae. Okay, now as you bring your knees into your chest, you're going to reach down for the belt, unbuckle, and then reach your right foot to the bolster and move it over to the left side of your mat. You might need both legs and arms to help you get over with the bolster to the left. And you might find some debris on your floor to move around, but with that bolster on the left side, we're going to take a crossover. So I want you to feel this in two ways. Bending through both knees, feel the right knee closer in. Now, as you bend through that right knee and feel it kind of tuck in as much as it can, push down to your left foot so that the left buttock is very toned, strengthening. Okay, and then as you stretch the left leg down, straighten out, cross the right leg over to the bolster, maybe add a ball to the sacrum, maybe, and a sandbag to the outer right thigh. If you don't have a ball, you can use a towel. That's something maybe to add to your props. So you have like a wadded towel. So it's kind of a mid-sized towel. So as you open out, I'm going to make the blanket a little bit more of a fold for my neck. So curl it up so it's higher underneath my head. And then when you place that sand, open out your arms, spread the limbs, all limbs motioning outwards, kind of moving out through from the midsection, kind of like starfish, right? So it stretches out, expands. Turn your head to the right and breathe. You got there, right? You got to the next shape. One shape at a time. So enjoy these final moments here of where you can replenish the flow of breath, the circulation from the heart, generating out to the limbs. And if you're pretty cool on the edge of the extremities, like the feet, this might be a time you cover them up with a sock, you know, so that you're really supporting yourself the whole time, the whole while of the practice. So it feels like it's really a therapeutic session, socks and all. I know you might even cover yourself up in a blanket. That's kind of a traditional, yep, there you are, Cynthia. That's a traditional class, is to cover up, especially this portion. Now where the breath roams, where the wild breath roams, right? You'll feel the arms as they're creating space at the chest level, just the right amount. It's like you're given just the right, you know, parts to open up organs and muscles around organs and lungs, and you can do the work. So from this very simple pace, in the next few moments, you're going to shift to the other side, but let's do a little core between. So move the ball, move the sand, and you know, whether you got blanket on you or not, you might find this is just fine. We're going to take that bridge pose. So you got your feet on the ground, you got no bolster under the feet this time, no belt around the legs. But feel where the hands are at the front of the thighs, right where the thigh lids are. So they have a perfect place, the hands. And when you lift up your heels and then you lift up your hips towards the ceiling, the blanket's a little higher under your head, so you're likely going to find this pretty easy to do. Now keep the heels lifting and then bring the hands to the floor. And then carefully lower the heels down as your hips try to keep lifting up. Okay, so notice the front of the thighs as much as you possibly can. Recognize it doesn't need to be muscling up more, but feel the belly breath, long spine, soft belly. And then lift the heels and reverse, lower down. Take the bolster to the right side and start to pattern your way into that side, depending on your interest. Left knee draws in. Okay, feel the spine centered, stretch the right leg down. And then once you get that left leg to cross over, feel how you reach through your waist into your knee when the hip crosses. Actually, it's a leg, right? The leg is crossing, but you could justify that your hip is crossing too. It's a crossed hip. It's a hip crossover. Hip crossing. Okay, open out the limbs and then feel the chest wide. Feel your head turn to the left. I could take some time making a yoga board game. Hip crossing. Sciatic point. All kinds of fun things. So if that right leg is a little bendy, You want to not enforce the straightness of bones, but they all have a natural contour. So enjoy that contouring. And then when you feel your head turn left, feel the head rotate from the shoulder to the side. Yeah, on a reclining pose, the directions of the head affects the neck, and it also roots the shoulders in a very sturdy basin, I find. So these real simple reclining crossovers are really good full body poses for posture, and it feels comfy. It's nice to do something that's comfortable. It's a few more moments here. Give the time, that replenishing breath through the ribs, through the chest, open. Now feel that medley of movement from your back muscles through the hip. And then we'll move it all in unison to an inversion, a final inversion. And I would encourage you to do an inversion that is so supported it's easygoing. So maybe the wall is the variation that's the most supported versus like a chair shoulder stand or a headstand, that kind of thing for inversion. So when I take the ball and the sand away, we're going to move now. As we move to a wall space, you might hug your knees in. You might just simply roll over side to side. Find what's easy for you because you'll need your bolster. And so when you come up and find a wall space, I want you to, if you're going to use, let's say, a bed to put your legs up on, or a chair or a couch, you can do that too. That works really good. So we're going to use our sand primarily, and you might want a blanket for under your head. And you might decide, no, I don't want anything under my head. That's okay. A pillow, a very flat pillow that you might have at home that you like, your favorite pillow, your favorite tiny pillow. Okay. Okay, so now as you lift up your seat on the bolster, you're going to want to turn and get as much of this swinging of the legs. It has to be sort of basic, right? You want to swing the legs up. And so the back of your head has a little bit of bump up, right, with the blankie. Now, once the legs are up on any of the surfaces that gets you upside down, okay, yeah, it might be nice if it's a bed, you might get out, move a little bit around, and the information coming to you doesn't have to be observed on the screen, so you can be kind of where you want to be in your house. So as you lift up your feet on the sand to the soles, you want to move the awareness of the legs to the wall. And so it's almost like my hamstrings are awakening. So my feet flex. But the going to the wall is the important part, that it's pushing towards the chair or the wall, whatever you have, it's pushing into that. And then the flow for the lymph, the intensifying flush of the lymph nodes is the next awareness. So feel where your arms are moving back and over, and let your hands relax, your fingers gently curl, and the back of your head, the skull, nestled into the floor, the blanket. And feel that length of your in-breath and equalize that length with the out-breath. Feel where your neck centers, all the way lining up in through the spine, and then wrapping around the ribs, back to that belly, rib, and chest breath that we began our session with. Yeah, and imagine that this practice has been beneficial, right, for your lymphatic system, your immune system, because of that lymph movement. And then structurally, it's been fairly serious sequencing. So relax out of that and just let yourself be and receive and absorb the practice. Take a few more moments here together. Now with the belly expanding and the tailbone resting, you're going to gradually start to slide the feet and maybe shift the legs off of the wall, especially if you have sand on your feet, right? You'll need to adjust to bend your knees and get that sand to depart from the feet. The knees bend, hug them in at the back of the legs. If you prefer to go into Baddha Konasana for a moment, push the knees a little bit out, that's an option. Or feel the natural combing around the front of the knee when they're drawn to the chest. And we want to round up the back. So feel the back round. Feel the lift of the hips. And then roll to a side. If you prefer to stay with your legs up and not come out, that's okay. You can still kind of join from where you're at and come around to find a seated position, whether you're sitting on a little bit of height on the corner of something to get your pelvis up, and then where the band of the diaphragmatic band kind of flows from the back tissues to the front tissues. Feel where your hands can be relaxed in your thighs and your shoulders centered back. Hands lift up, flow up to the space in front of the heart, and bow your brain down to your heart center and surrender here. And enter a thought of feeling the support from others that are in the collective for the session today. And I wish you wellness and peace. Inhale, exhale, namaste. Okay. All right.